Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and we are having our monthly check-in with Colorado Workforce Development Council. I have in studio with me Lee Wheeler-Berliner. How are you doing, Lee?
I'm doing great, Alex. How are you today?
Fantastic, thank you. It's a great day. It's warmer out than it has been. I'll take it.
A little bit, yes.
Yes, for sure. And I also have Brandon McReynolds here, and he is the Talent Development Research Analyst and Post-Secondary Coordinator for the Colorado Department of Higher Education. How are you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I'm a little worried for you having to say your title all the time.
Yes, it's quite long.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, I need an acronym, I think.
I think so, because there aren't enough when you work for the government,
yes,
right?
Yes, when you work in education and government, there's never enough acronyms being thrown around.
Yes, absolutely. So we have an exciting report to get to today. It's the 2018 Talent Pipeline Report that we're going to talk on, which, Brandon, you are the author of.
Yes.
Yes, which is exciting. But before we do that, I want to talk to you a little bit. We had an event on Monday that you were part of. Yes, Colorado Workforce Development Council was one of our event sponsors, along with University of Denver, for our Champions in Industry Awards ceremony. That was our second annual awards luncheon. What'd you think?
Alex, that was a fantastic event. It was great to be a sponsor and to just get to celebrate the excellence in several companies across so many different industries in the state of Colorado.
Yeah, it was unexpectedly more accessible to networking than I thought it was going to be. Yeah.
Right. And I'd never been in that facility before, the Cable Center. It was a great venue for businesses to check out and to see kind of the history of the cable industry and what it's meant for the state as well. It was really neat.
Yeah, it was super awesome and a great event, and catered by Footers Catering, which they won in hospitality and lodging. So we did not vote on that, for the record. Brandon, I know you're looking at me. Spying on me over here.
Alex, do you have any more of the cookies left?
I do.
Oh,
You're
perfect.
welcome. Yeah,
Okay.
I will get you both some cookies
on the way
before you
out.
leave. Those
Okay.
were, again, made by Footers Catering. They were amazing. But let's go ahead and get involved, and we'll talk about this Talent Pipeline Report. So what is it?
Absolutely. So this year, in just a couple weeks, we're going to be publicly releasing the 2018 Colorado Talent Pipeline Report. And we're excited to be sharing with you all kind of the preview today. So Brandon is the lead author. As you mentioned, Alex, he works with the Department of Higher Education and also works with the Colorado Workforce Development Council. And so we believe in connecting and collaborating, and that goes all the way through to the staff and the way that we structure our positions and work with other agencies. So kind of to open it up, Brandon, what is the Talent Pipeline Report? And talk to us a little bit about the report, what it is, and its purpose.
So the Talent Pipeline Report is this year. It will be its 5th edition. So it's been going on. It is a report that goes to the state legislatures to focus on the education and workforce, both the demand and supply issues in Colorado. So on both sides of that, and being able to give an annual update to understand where does Colorado have opportunity for growth, where are we succeeding, and how can we continue on the trajectory that we're on going forward.
Absolutely. This is a report that is somewhat unique in the country. There are not a lot of other states that have taken this type of look and analysis at their pipeline, and it's quickly become a model for other states to look at. Brandon, talk to us about who's involved. This report's been in development for a while, so how many different players contribute to this report?
What's so great about this report is that while it's a state government report, it has multiple public and private partners that are involved in the process. Everyone from K through 12, the Colorado Department of Education, Colorado Department of Higher Ed, State Demographer's Office, Human Services, Economic Development, and that's just some of the state partners, Department of Labor. Privately, there's groups such as CareerWise and Skillful and others that are involved, Young Invincibles that have contributed information and been a part of not only just putting the report together, but these are partners that we have in our workforce and education system throughout the year. So it's an ongoing relationship, and they're a part of that. And we want to highlight the work that's going on at the state level and locally around Colorado and what's going on in education and workforce.
Okay, great. And it really is a report that is about the state of Colorado overall. It could equally be called the Talent Pipeline Report in Colorado. It's not necessarily owned by the government by any stretch. So it's a great collaborative report. The CWDC, the Workforce Development Council, is the lead on this report. Brandon, why does that make sense? How do you see the CWDC really playing that role and lead?
The role of the CWDC and the Workforce Board as a state is one is just a connector and a collaborator in general. I mean, that is the function of that group in so many ways, is to be able to bring both business and state government and local and entities and workforce boards together to be able to have a really in-depth discussion that looks from all different angles at what's going on in terms of workforce across our state. So I think it's perfectly positioned to be able to provide this kind of middle spot between kind of the private and public sector.
And you mentioned that the report kind of looks at that basic macroeconomics 101, supply and demand. How does that equation work? And that's a key part of what the CWDC is focused on for all of our work. Our vision is that every Colorado business has access to skilled talent and that every Coloradan has access to meaningful employment. So we're always looking to create that balance and that equilibrium between supply and demand so that we can see economic vitality throughout our state. So this report really sets that up really well.
Right.
Every year, the people who have become the avid consumers of this report are legislators, a lot of our key business members, and it's become a document that we hear human resource officers really pick up and dig into. It gets passed through companies so they can understand and predict kind of what's coming down the pipeline. I know a lot of those folks are always excited to see what is the latest group of top jobs. And that term of top jobs is something that has been kind of coined through this report. So talk to us about what a top job is.
So historically, in this part of this report, we have defined top jobs. We have a set of parameters, and those parameters involve number of annual openings. There has to be more than 40 annual openings. It has to have an annual growth rate of larger than 2%, and the job or occupation has to pay a livable wage. And so to do that, we talk about jobs in a binary to a two-part tier, Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 1 are jobs that make enough to support a family of 3, so 2 adults, 1 working with a child. And Tier 2 jobs are jobs that are make enough to for the state standard of living for a livable wage for an individual. And so they're broken up in the report and discussed in both of those tiers, and it allows us to be able to just look at these 2 different areas of job growth, as well as to be able to, as we begin to talk about things like building pathways and occupational tracks, it's important to be able to show those to both business as well as individuals to be able to create those types of opportunities.
Great. And it's not based off minimum wage. It's based off that level of self-sufficiency to a certain extent. What's the difference there? What are those numbers roughly?
The difference is we're using a statewide number when it comes to a wage. So it's standardized across Colorado, and we're using the livable wage calculator that was produced by MIT. It's a widely used metric for what constitutes a livable wage. So when it comes to an individual, it's a couple dollars above minimum wage, but when it comes to for the Tier 1 jobs, which support 2 adults and a child, that's around $23.50 an hour, so greatly above a minimum wage across Colorado.
Okay. And so it might be easy for some people to think that a top job is a really good job if it's going to pay well. Certainly that requires a 4-year degree or maybe even a master's or other advanced degrees. Is that what we see across the full spectrum of top jobs or not?
There is certainly a relationship when it comes to pay and educational and training experiences and broadly attainment. But there is opportunities for to be able to be in this. There are many jobs within Tier 1 that don't necessarily require a 4-year degree or maybe even a 2-year associate's degree. Mm-hmm. There are many occupations that require CTE experience, so career and technical education, or maybe just require experience through an apprenticeship or some type of licensure and a more skilled trade. So there's some diversity there, but we do see this concentration of high attainment being more in the higher pay field, so in the Tier 1 top jobs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And obviously here on the radio, we can't display all the wonderful Excel spreadsheets and data tables and graphs when the report is publicly released. And every year it's released on the Colorado Workforce Development Council's website.
Yes.
So coworkforcecouncil.org. You can connect later on in the month of December and download that. And we supply all the different data charts. So whatever level of wonkiness somebody wants to dig dig into with Excel and data. It's there.
And in the report, we really concentrate on top jobs for the state of Colorado as a whole. But what you're going to be able to do is there's an interactive tool that we have online so that people can look at top jobs based off of their region of the state. So whether you're in Denver or you're in Boulder or any of the MSAs or any of the rural areas, you're going to be able to look up and see, based off of our methodology of what constitutes a top job, what are the top jobs in your local area? So it's a little bit more regionally specific than just talking about Colorado broadly.
Great.
Just to pop in here, what's an MSA?
Oh, an MSA, sorry. A metropolitan statistical area. So it's a census area. So multiple cities sometimes can be included. So like, for instance, Denver and Aurora are combined.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. I know you love your acronyms.
Is
that's what I hadn't heard of specifically in here. So thank you.
Thanks for catching me on it.
Yep. So part of the history of this report is that the creation of it was called for by the state legislature. And so our state level policymakers are a primary audience for this, but we've come to see that businesses really value it as well. So Brandon, why do you believe businesses should care about what's in this report?
Well, the report talks broadly about what's going on in Colorado in terms of labor market shifts, in terms of things from unemployment to labor participation. And I think specifically one area that the report touches on every year is our ongoing demographic shifts and changes. And I think it's important for business and individuals broadly, anybody who's a part of the Colorado market, to understand where we are headed as a state and what those shifts are going to mean for long-term ability to grow and enhance our economy here in Colorado. And so I think it brings in kind of even more moving away from just the economics or the labor kind of stats. It brings in kind of the social side of why it's important for us to, on a regular basis, be evaluating this and understanding the trajectory that we're on.
Okay. And so what will people learn about the demographic shifts and how they're impacting the supply of talent in Colorado right now for this report?
Yeah, I think it's really important. One thing that we touch on this year is we're really starting to recognize that there's a slow, our in-migration is drastically slowing down. Coming out of the recession, Colorado saw a huge population boom, just like we kind of saw in the early 90s. But now it's slowing down. So we're not going to be able to be as dependent on talent from out of state or being able to attract that talent as we have been. So what's important there is the recognition that what that data tells us is it's even more important for us to think about investing in everything from pre-K to our K through 12 system and higher education, because we're going to be much more dependent on our homegrown talent than an ability to just import talent per se.
Great. And so how well are we doing right now in terms of meeting our state talent needs?
I think that it depends on who you would talk to. I think that business would always say, and of course I would agree that there's always opportunities for growth and for need. But I think that it's more than just demanding talent. I think that we have to look at the ways in which that we use things like degrees as proxies for measures. I think that the whole system has to be evaluated. But the great part is that Colorado has been super successful over the past decade, and I think it's been an opportunity for us to continue to be innovative. So while it may be difficult at times to find jobs, especially things like nurses and teachers, and often times. But there's opportunities there for us to continue to improve, and now, due to the current economic conditions, is the time to do it.
Mm-hmm. Sure. What are some of the largest challenges that we're seeing right now?
One of the largest is, this pertains to two occupations that I just mentioned in terms of registered nurses and teachers, and there's other occupations that fit into this bucket as well, is especially on the Front Range in the Denver area, is the cost of living. The reality that when it comes to not only students taking on the debt of going and receiving some form of a credential and paying that cost, but the reality that their income post that, is it so much that, is it more than daycare per se? And that's just a reality of expenses and the increased cost of living. And so I would say that, one of the biggest things just we as a state have to continue to be aware of is how the continued economic prosperity and increases in prices, whether that be home prices, food prices, healthcare costs are impacting people's thought process and whether deciding that they want to stay home. I mean, it may make more economic sense for one person to stay home and take care of kids rather than sending to daycare or doing other things. And so a lot of families are facing those economic questions, and it's important for us as a state to recognize that that could be potentially holding back people that would be really great assets to our labor force.
Yeah, and that issue of childcare and the rising costs, I think we've talked about it in this forum several months back, and our organization is involved right now in some work around the education industry and helping to understand what are those career pathways for individuals who are providing that early childhood care and the educators, because that age group of 0 to 5 is so critical for actually providing skills and helping to support positive brain development to ensure that we've got kids who are kindergarten ready and then on a better track to graduate high school and support the workforce over the long term. So it's a big issue. I know personally it's my biggest monthly expense with 2 kids in daycare right now. I think it's about the same, if not more, than public tuition at some state 4-year universities. So scary things now. I'll party in a few years, then cringe again when they hit the college, or see what apprenticeships are ready for them to move into.
Yeah, but it's something that a lot of most Colorado families face on a daily basis, and you can't blame them from a policy perspective in deciding that it may make more economic sense for somebody to take an alternative option and maybe not work. But I think we as a state need to think big picture and what can we do at both the local and state level to alleviate some of that.
Absolutely. So how do you see some of those challenges pertaining back to the top jobs that are highlighted this year in the 2018 report?
What do you mean by that?
So if someone has a top job, does that mitigate all those other challenges? Does that magically mean they're going to be in a great spot, or do we still see top jobs that are creating issues with some of those other challenges?
Yeah, I would think that the reality is that the top jobs methodology is not perfect, and to say that it is just wouldn't be accurate. I think the recognition that the levels and what we've defined as a living wage is what broadly is mathematically makes sense as a living wage, but may not necessarily make sense depending on where in Colorado you live. Certain parts of our state, all regions have different costs of living, and so to be able to say that certain occupations are going to be able to provide for such that a family structure doesn't mean that fits at the local level, which is why we really want to provide those local numbers to be able to give people more of an accurate kind of description of what's going on the ground in their local community. So I would say that when it comes to top jobs, it's one of those challenges that we face, but it is a reality that there's opportunities, and especially to see how top jobs are stackable and move in terms of a pathway are really important.
Right. And that's an excellent point, because the list of top jobs that's published every year in the Talent Pipeline Report becomes the foundation through which we develop statewide career pathways. And so the work that our team does at the CWDC in close partnership with the Colorado Community College System and the Department of Higher Education as well is all grounded in what do we see as the positive opportunities. And again, a big part of the reason why we engage in this work, we do the analysis to understand what the top jobs are. And to be clear, there's also future growth factored into that. So what does that projection look like over the long term is one of the criterion that goes into that calculation so that people can pick up this report. If you're in high school right now and you're trying to think, what are the careers I want to pursue, you can see where there's growth opportunities and what are the jobs that are likely going to be there for the next 5 years, 10 and 15 years. What our team does is when we look at this report every year, we try to cluster those top jobs into specific industries and then look at the industries that have the biggest concentration and then use that to have the members, the governor-appointed members of the CWDC, make the decisions on which industries we tackle. And so when I mentioned that we're focused on the education sector right now, it's because that is what the report was showing us last year in terms of concentrations of top jobs, of growth opportunities, of high number of openings, and that's where the council chose to focus its energies and efforts. As that work takes place, a few different things happen. We start with the foundation of the top jobs to say these are things we know are good opportunities. But then we get businesses in the room and we go out and talk with business leaders within this industry to say, okay, this is what the data tells us. When we pull the data in the back room, it says you're going to have 700 openings this next year. What does your data tell you? Sometimes we have a company that says, well, no, it's actually a whole lot less than that because your data doesn't reflect the closing of a plant that happened or a shift that has happened externally. Sometimes they say, actually, 700 is how many I need next month, and I'm going to need a lot more after that. So we got to pick up the pace here of what we're doing. And so we first vet that information. We validate it with the industries to understand what it actually means and how it's playing out. And then we understand that in connection with top jobs, there's also critical occupations for an industry. Sometimes that's one and the same. Sometimes that registered nurse position, which is a top job, is also absolutely critical for a healthcare organization because that's driving their patient care and their customer care. Sometimes we see a top job that may not be identified by an employer or by an industry as a critical occupation, but it's that next step. Or there's critical occupations that are necessary to prepare someone for a top job. And so we're able to then visually map all of that information to really get tangible products out there that people can utilize.
Yeah, I think it's really important is people look at the report and see some of the top jobs, is to especially see, some of these jobs can be destinations in terms of there's ways that people can build yourself up. You don't have to necessarily go and get the 4-year RN degree immediately. You can get your CN and other things that help build towards that. And I think our pathway work has helped show that and has helped show that and will, especially in terms of education this year, and has shown in the past in terms of IT and business services and other industries.
Right. And Brandon, you mentioned this is the 5th version of the report, so there's been several that have come out previously. What kind of shifts have you noticed in the top jobs? Have you seen any changes from year to year in looking at the group last year versus this year, as an example?
Yeah, I think one of the largest changes that we're seeing is in terms of growth in terms of healthcare and in the service industry. There's a lot of growth taking place in the service industry as the economy improves and people are their buying power improves. You're seeing growth in those industries, and we're seeing a lot of growth in those occupations as well. So that really highlights and is shown, I think, in this year's report when you look at the top jobs, and even if you look at it regionally, retail is still an area that's growing. And so is healthcare. And healthcare, as another demographic shift that's taking place, is that Colorado is getting older. And because of that, healthcare will continue to grow in our state for a continued period of time. And so that's really important just to be aware of in terms of things like registered nurses. We're not going to hit our peak anytime soon. We're still a good decade or so away from hitting our kind of healthcare growth.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So as the population ages, there's more of a demand for certain types of services, whether that be the healthcare side. Obviously, that's huge. But then also, I hear in some reports, older populations may eat out more or do less cooking inside the home or need other just supportive roles.
Supportive services are huge, yeah.
Yeah, so that can then drive a lot of different shifts along down the line.
Yeah, I was curious about the service industry myself. Actually, I thought that growth in the service industry was quite interesting. It's not something I would have guessed for this talent pipeline report. We've got just a minute here left. Last thoughts in this segment on this talent pipeline, and what was an interesting factor for you that you found?
I think when pertaining to this area, when it comes to top jobs, is that we have an ability to make some really short-term wins in terms of seeing change over time. And being able to help meet those demands. It's not seeing a problem now and having to wait long term to be able to come up with some program or some solution. Recognizing it and looking at this data on a regular basis allows us to be agile and make those changes now. And I think that's really important as people kind of look at what data and this type of report can really do, and why it is so important is that it really can make incremental change.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to be right back here on Connect and Collaborate, so stay with us. Be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here, and we will continue this talk on the 2018 Talent Pipeline Report. Stay with us. Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. Once again, I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and we are talking with Colorado Workforce Development Council, CWDC, as we lovingly call it here, Lee Wheeler-Berliner, Director of CWDC.
Hello.
Hello. And Brandon McReynolds, Talent Development Research Analyst and Post-Secondary Coordinator. We're going to get you an acronym soon at the Colorado.
We're going to have to.
the Colorado Department of Higher Education, and also author of the Talent Pipeline report that we're going over here. And again, that's going to be released in just a couple of weeks, but we're getting some preliminary reports, and I'm excited for this conversation. It's fascinating, really. Yeah.
So it's great to give a sneak preview, dig into kind of what our state is seeing right now in terms of where talent is. What are the demands for talent that we see coming out of businesses, and what are the supply look like? How well are we doing as a state in preparing our workers to kind of tackle what the future needs are? And part of the analysis that we see is that we look at that supply from a few different perspectives, and we kind of group it into different buckets. You know, we talk about the future of work and the shifting landscape and how there will be a need for people to really be able to be lifelong learners and to adapt and to really push critical thinking and use critical thinking and reasoning as a key tool to develop the skills for the jobs of the future. Some of those job titles we don't know yet what they'll be. Some we have a sense of what they're going to be. But if you think back 15 years ago, the idea of a social media manager didn't really exist back then. And now that's pretty commonplace. So there'll be lots of things that pop up. There you go. And so, you know, as we think about that in this Talent Pipeline report, we look at our supply in a few different groups. One is the existing workforce. And so we're categorizing that as adults 25 years and older, people who are already participating in the labor force, or they're in that age bracket, but maybe are not necessarily participating in the labor force to the fullest extent. So that's one group. How do we work with existing workers? How do we ensure they're prepared moving forward? Another group is everybody under 24 years of age, and those folks that our education system in the state, our early childhood education, child care, as we were talking about, through post-secondary education, how well are those systems preparing those individuals to be the talent that our state needs? And, you know, that's maybe long-term and maybe short-term. There's a lot of people in high school and college right now who are just a couple steps away from being in the workforce, as well as those who have a longer lead time in being ready. A third group is really our underutilized pockets of talent. So groups that are not participating in the labor force at a rate as high as they could be. And so that's a group that's important to listen to and pay attention to. And then a fourth group is looking at that net migration. And as Brandon mentioned earlier, we're at a place where we're seeing the in-migration really slow down into the state of Colorado. So as we talk about strategies and the way programs can work to support our supply moving forward, we're really focusing on those top three groups. As we think about that, Brandon, we're at a point in time in Colorado where unemployment is super low. It's not quite the lowest in the country, but it has been recently. You know, I talked to a lot of my peers in other places, and we kind of jockey back and forth around that. So I think we crested a little bit above 3% again. But how does the Talent Pipeline report address the tight labor market that we have right now?
Right. So first, I think it's important to understand just kind of the computation or what an unemployment percentage means. I think that's something we touch on the report. And so those are the percentage of people that are looking for work and can't find it. But what we recognize is that with low unemployment and the ability for people to find some form of work and keeping that number low, is there's a need to really address a portion of of Coloradans who are outside of the labor force, who are not being calculated into that number when it comes to unemployment. And while Colorado broadly has a pretty high, we have the 9th highest labor participation rate in the country, close to 70% of Coloradans are involved in the labor force, which is great. Again, there still provides us with opportunity to be able to say, you know, what's going on with the other 30% of our working age population? Why are they not engaged in the labor force? Is it because of some economic reality? It just, you know, maybe it's a family where only one person is working. But a reality that there are opportunities for growth. Even with low unemployment, there's still so many Coloradans that we want to engage. And if they want to be a part of the labor force in some way or want to upskill, we still want to ensure that those opportunities are available.
Right. And I know there's a data point where we have at least 70,000 Coloradans who, through surveys, say they want a job, but are not currently actively counted in that unemployment rate.
Right.
And so that's the example of how do we bring people in off of the sidelines to help them with whatever steps they need to take to become active members of the labor force.
And often those populations have a lot of barriers when it comes to being able to take on a job, whether they maybe it's an ability issue or corrections background or something of that nature that is important for us to be able to address, because for the state to continue to move forward and for our whole economy to move forward, there's not there's no corner that we can leave, kind of unchecked. And so I think that's really important for us to look at that and be able to find, if somebody wants a job, even those 70,000. I mean, the idea of work and what that means, we want to ensure that we have the opportunities to help break down those barriers for those individuals.
Absolutely. And so our businesses have demands for talent right now. It's a tight labor market. There's a lot of different ways that can be addressed. Brandon, what are some of the thematic ways that this report addresses that tightening labor market and the demands of businesses?
Yeah, I think it addresses it in several different ways. One of those has been a major focus of the state of Colorado, and it's expansion of what we call work-based learning. So opportunities to put learners of all ages, whether they be youth or adults, in opportunities where they are learning a craft, maybe, or some skills, and gaining that educational and training experience, but also having the opportunity to do it in a work-based setting. That helps students and individuals be able to identify this is not just some knowledge or skills that is coming from a book, but actually this is very applicable to the daily life. And we think that things like that, so what's encompassed in work-based learning are things like apprenticeships and internships. Those are just two examples of really where Colorado is focused on and creating opportunities, again, from youth all the way to adults to be engaged, and also do it in a way that may provide opportunities for individuals that maybe more traditional education pathways that require taking on debt or higher levels of cost are. And it also allows business to be able to meet more of an immediate demand when it comes to talent. If you were really in need of some skilled trades or even IT professionals, for example, it's a growing area for apprenticeships. It's a great opportunity to train the individual within your culture, within the things that you do on a daily basis. It also provides a great opportunity through that training process to almost be having like a year-long interview with them as you're a part of that educational experience, and will improve your hiring practices as well.
Right. When I first started with the Colorado Workforce Development Council, my role was heavily focused on policy. And I got to sit and read 300 pages of federal law, figure out what in the world that meant for our state.
So fun.
And after I got through all that, I made my 10-slide deck. And I was like, okay, I'm ready to share the gospel of federal policy with the state. And so I was traveling to different parts of the state of Colorado and giving this presentation that was a little policy oriented, saying, well, here was a federal law. This is the change. This is what that means for us. And we're going to go through this process. We're going to set up new state policies. We're going to dissect regulations, and we're going to do all this work. And there was a business leader in the room in one location in the Western Slope who just said, yeah, that's great. Some of it's semantics. Some of it is refreshing old stuff. But my colleague over here needs 2 employees tomorrow. How does this help him? Mm-hmm. And at the time, thinking about federal regulations, there's not much of an answer. But the beauty of our public workforce system right now and the emphasis on work-based learning is that that's one of those solutions. For a business who needs talent immediately, who is willing to engage in some level of training, there's opportunities for you to get people in the door, for workforce centers to help give you a list of names, to do basic reviews of those candidates and screenings for companies, and then also in some cases subsidize some of those wages during that training period. So there's a lot of different opportunities that we see.
And there's a lot of opportunities in that sense for business to engage and partner with the traditional kind of post-secondary path, including higher education in terms of our community college, and that not only can a student come in and get that training at your business, but there is an opportunity that they can use some of that potentially for credit within the traditional higher education system. Mm-hmm. So it's a bang for their buck, and that they're gaining skills, knowledge, and competencies that they're going to be able to use in the workforce, and potentially they'll be making some money if it's an apprenticeship at the same time, while also they can be earning college credit. So it's a win-win-win for the student, the business, and even our education system.
Great. So when the report comes out later on in December and you download it from coworkforcecouncil.org, you'll see there's 3 main sections. There's the demand section, analyzing the direction of our economy and what jobs are needed. The supply section, which assesses where we currently stand in developing those 4 groups that I mentioned earlier. And then there's a big section on strategies.
Right.
What are the things that we're already doing to meet these demands? As we've said, this is the 5th Talent Pipeline Report. We've foreseen some of these issues around a skills shortage and a talent gap in our state, and there's been a lot of focus and effort that direction. So Brandon, in that strategy section, can you tell us about some of the strategies we've seen really be successful around the state?
Yeah, there's a number. I think that one thing that we've kind of touched on here a little bit is an opportunity to meet families and individuals where they are in their lives. And then that requires often what we call a two-gen approach. So the ability to see a whole family holistically and supporting more than just the learner, whether that be the child or the parent, but both sides. And so one of the examples that we highlight is the ability to see the connection and be able to have a connection between post-secondary opportunities as well as early childhood education. And the report touches on several of our institutions across the state that are doing fabulous work in ensuring that childcare and education for young kids is not a barrier for an ability for an adult to go and earn some type of post-secondary credential that in the long run is going to be beneficial not only to them, but their kids and their families, and also providing them with an opportunity that their individuals' kids are having great access to some of the best pre-K opportunities that there are. And so I think that's an opportunity and something that we highly touch on there. We also talk about our work around skills-based hiring and things of that nature. And so our work with our partners like Skillful in terms of talking about the need to adjust our strategy in terms of what are we putting on job applications or job requirements, and how are we looking at and evaluating people's skills and competencies is really important. And so that's kind of a more less concrete kind of strategy that we're using, but it is a way that we're trying to make the labor market more obtainable for all Coloradans.
Okay. And that skills-based aspect is critical right now because it also then ultimately helps people transfer across experiences and potentially across industries. So we mentioned the service sector, and we're seeing an increasing demand in service sector jobs. That is an industry that provides a tremendous amount of on-the-job learning opportunities to develop specific skills and concrete competencies that can help someone progress within that industry or transfer into different places. I think if you go into a room of 100 people and you ask who had their first job in retail or in the service sector, you're going to see a huge number of hands shoot up. And when you ask the next question of, and what did you learn in that specific job? What did that teach you?
People are terrible.
Right. And you see the foundational skills, those things that people have built on and moved throughout their life. And so we incorporate that skills-based focus into our career pathway work to really map out how things are being translated. And I want to touch on, again, just that idea of the work-based learning and what that means. And we see experiential learning happening at all levels within educational entities, but within companies as well. And I had the opportunity just earlier this week to visit a Walmart training academy. And these are academies. This store was set up in Southeast Aurora, where they have brought through more than 1 million associates into these academies to go through classroom training. And so they have classroom space in their building. But even with that focus, 70% of the curriculum takes place back out in the store, and it's on the floor. So you might be in a classroom for a short period of time to learn about a new concept, but then you're actually back in the work environment, ensuring that what you're learning can be put into use and be put into play. And so that idea of experiential learning is absolutely critical.
Yeah, it really helps to take students out of the classroom, out from the desk and from the traditional seat time, kind of the way that we calculate attainment or give some, say somebody has skills, to being able to show, improve, and see the applicability of the things that they're learning. And I think that's really important for students to see, of all ages, to be able to see, okay, this is not just philosophical or just something that's in a book. This is something that I need to learn to be able to operate on a daily basis.
Great. And, you know, one of the strategies I really like in an impact story in this year's report is the mobile learning lab. Can you tell us about the mobile learning lab, or you want me to elaborate on that? So Colorado is a big state. We got 64 different counties. We don't necessarily have educational entities at a post-secondary level in all those counties. And sometimes people are really limited from transportation and how far they can go. And so Pueblo Community College has actually developed these mobile learning labs where they can drive a truck to a specific location, to a facility, whether it's in another county in southeast Colorado or even southwest Colorado, and then they've got the equipment right there. And they actually have a welding lab. So if you think
it's
you
on
might
like a
want
bus.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you want to learn to weld, we can get their lab right out here in your parking lot outside of the studio, go through that coursework, and you'll get prepped up for that next transition you're thinking about.
That's amazing.
Yeah, indeed. You know, we talked earlier about how this is a collaborative report in the development of it. A lot of different hands are involved. Why is it a focus of collaboration in how some of these strategies play out?
The reality is that often organizations and entities and agencies and government can often become siloed and trying to solve problems from one perspective. I think to be able to bring both public and private entities together and hear all the various perspectives that are involved in the difficulties and challenges and barriers really helps to come up with a true holistic, sustainable solution rather than just a Band-Aid fix to a potential problem. So that level of collaboration is key, and it's a reason why Colorado is able to succeed is that it's not about who is doing it or who's getting the credit for it. It's more about this holistic, we need to do this as a system, as a collective group, and I think that's really important for us to be able to continue to move forward, and we've had a lot of success in doing that type of collaboration.
That's one thing that I noticed before you mentioned in the first segment, that a lot of the consumers of this report are the legislators, right? And so working on perhaps maybe we can get some public policy changes on making kindergarten all-day kindergarten so we can get more people into the workforce, right? And so having access to that, it's a beautiful way to say it. The collaboration is great.
Yeah, and then that these things are all interrelated in a different way, and that one solution, when the impacts of early childhood impact K through 12, which then impacts the post-secondary and workforce system, we're all interdependent on one another, and it's really important to see that, which is why collaboration is so important for us to be able to do. And it also makes, again, I think it sustains the work rather than it just being one minor project or one attempt to minor fix after another.
Right. And we believe in a demand-driven economy. We know that following the needs of businesses is the way this is going to work. And the way some of my colleagues tell it is you can train somebody all night and day, but if there's not a paid job opportunity waiting for them in that field by the time they're done, you haven't gained any ground in our efforts overall. And so we believe in public-private partnerships. We have a network of industry-led sector partnerships throughout the state, which is one forum where businesses can come together and engage in some of these issues. We also connect the trade associations that exist throughout the state. We call it the Industry Intermediary Consortium. And so if you're a member of a trade association, ask them if they're a part of that consortium and if they're coming to a collective table where they can dig into some of these issues and we can move things forward. And so I share part of this because legislators are a key audience for this report. And we have some key recommendations that we have, and I want to get to those in just a moment. And I just want to tee it up for the businesses listening in today that a legislator can read the report, they can look at a recommendation, and it's going to resonate one way on paper. But when they pick up the telephone and there's a business from their community who's also telling them the same thing, or you're able to give that local flavor to why this is a struggle for you and what limitations you have to growing your business and enhancing the economy in that person's backyard, that's going to make a bigger impact and help us drive change. So keep that in mind as we talk about some of these things. With that, Brandon, what are some of the big recommendations that are coming out of this report this year?
So I think that there's really kind of three thematic buckets that we focused on, and I'll just kind of broadly talk about areas that we recognize that we need to focus on. One of those is equity and access. They're kind of together and they're talked about in each one of our recommendations. And this speaks to the demographic shifts and an opportunity to create the labor market so that it's more equitable and accessible for all Coloradans. And I think broadly that's a thematic point that you can see in each of our each of the very more specific kind of recommendations. And also, there's one that really kind of stands out to me specifically as a need for Colorado to leverage federal dollars more. And this is very much kind of a state policy kind of side. The federal government, through different programs, matches dollars and does a lot of matching type initiatives. And so I think it's really important for Colorado, through initiatives like that, to ensure that we're maximizing the ability for us to get those dollars that exist out there. This also applies to things like FAFSA. Colorado ranks very low, actually near the very bottom in FAFSA completion in the U.S. And so we're leaving hundreds of millions of dollars on the table every year because of that. And that's a problem. Those are dollars that our students and learners could be using to go and earn some form of a post-secondary credential. And the dollars are sitting out there, but we're just not leveraging those dollars enough. And it's opportunities for low-hanging fruit for us to continue to win.
Mm-hmm. Great. There's also a recommendation around infrastructure. Yeah. And for development to thrive, whether it is physical construction or roads or the development of people, we have to have the right infrastructure in place. And so when we talk about work-based learning, we want to ensure that we have an aligned infrastructure in the state of Colorado. And so that's an area of recommendations coming out of this report this year as well, is that we've tackled some of those barriers. When we talk about youth apprenticeships, companies have a lot of the same questions. It's, what does it mean for my unemployment insurance to have a 17-year-old on my shop floor? Or, no, it's just forbidden for that person of that age to be in my work environment. Some of those things are true. Some are myths. And in the past years, we've dug into those from the Department of Labor and Employment, and we actually have a Mythbusters document out there in relation to youth apprenticeships. We know that there's still other barriers that exist and that are holding us back from really unleashing the full potential of work-based learning. And so we have recommendations around studying and assessing local and state level barriers in other agencies, whether that's with regulatory agencies or educational entities as well. We also know through this work that sometimes businesses are hesitant to jump in, and there's great reasons for that. Everyone is out there working to meet your goals and moving towards your bottom line. And in Colorado, we're driven by small businesses. And so a lot of times people don't feel they have the bandwidth and the people to tackle some of these new initiatives. And so we have recommendations around assessing potential incentives and running some pilot programs with specified populations such as veterans to really test some ideas for how the state can support businesses to test some of these concepts and really see what that does to move our state forward.
Especially businesses of all sizes as well, because we often see large companies, it's with a larger overhead and their ability to come in and take part in work-based learning programs or being a part of other things. There are recommendations around ensuring that there is access for small and medium-sized businesses to be able to do this too if they want, in terms of some type of state incentive or local incentive is really important to being able to kind of spur this normative change.
Wonderful. This is fascinating, and I love this and all the recommendations that you've got for moving this report forward. Again, it will be out in a couple weeks on the Colorado Workforce Development Council website, which we do tag in our blog post for the show. That is at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. Look up CWDC, Colorado Workforce Development Council, Lee Wheeler Berliner. You can find all of that there for sure. One of my favorite things that I like to ask you guys when you come to visit is what you would be doing if you didn't have the job that you have now. We're talking workforce development. What would you be doing, Lee, if you weren't the director of CWDC?
So I took a personality test a few years back, and it said that I should either be leading an agency in a strategic thinking role that's doing systems change, or I should be an entertainer. So we did not win our Halloween party this year, in which I created a rap related to all of our work. That was a sad thing, but I'd be giving that my go with my fiddle and guitar.
I love that. Yeah, you could still wear bow ties.
Yeah,
it would still be applicable.
I think you could be successful in that, Lee.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
It would work out. Oh, this is a tough question. I'm not quite sure. Prior to going to grad school, I had always thought that I was going to go into an occupation like law or something, but I would have to say that it would still be something quite analytical. It's just who I am.
Well, at least you know yourself.
Yeah.
Not everyone can say that. Thank you so much, gentlemen. This has been a pleasure, and I'm excited to see the report when it comes out.
Yes, thank you, Alex.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alex.
Have a great day.